What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to use words. If you haven't seen that video, the one before this, you know what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about pots and values. How much should you spend for them? What really matters when it comes to picking the pots for your guitar? Because there's a fair amount of snake oil out there about it. And you can spend a lot of money. When I say a lot of money, I mean $25, $30 for a pot, or you can, we have them on the website for like $5, right? So what's the difference? And when you're putting together a project, when you're upgrading a guitar, what do you want to look for? Okay, so it's important to understand the job of the potentiometer in a guitar. So we've got a couple of different styles of wiring that will have an influence on how we choose this stuff. Okay, so we'll go for the most simple. Of course, we have a single volume knob, but for the purposes of our conversation, probably the simplest setup would be Telecaster, right? Where you have a volume and a tone, and this volume is controlling the volume for both pickups, right? Especially when it's in the middle position. And this tone is controlling the tone for both pickups at the same time. So you have one pot doing the job for both pickups on the volume side, and one pot doing the job for both pickups on the tone side. Now, we have probably maybe the next more complex arrangement where we have a Stratocaster. And these can be done a couple of different ways. When they come stock from the factory, this volume will control the volume for all three. This tone will control this pickup, and this tone will control basically, is it these two or is it just this one? I can't remember. I don't do it this way anymore, so I can't remember. The way I wire them is this volume does all three pickups, this tone does these two pickups, and this tone does the bridge pickup by itself. That's kind of the more modern way of wiring a Strat. So the pot values, how much do they matter, etc. Then we also have a situation where we have a Les Paul, where we have each tone, right, and each volume controlling a separate pickup. So this one controls this one controls this one controls this, and this one controls this. So you have 4 pots doing 4 separate jobs, okay? So how much does value matter? I'll tell you what let's do before we even have this conversation. Let's go over to the bench and we're going to pull some pickups out, or some pots out, and we're going to measure them right off the get before we even get started. I've not done this. We'll just pull them and we'll measure them right now. So this is where the pots come from. They come in a bag. So I'll tell you what, we're not gonna pick them, okay? I'm not gonna hand pick, right? Let's just grab 1, 2, 3, let's see. Oops, sorry about the shaky camera. Okay, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 250s, and then let's grab 1, 2, 3, 4, 500s. All right, that way we get a good cross section of capacitors, or I apologize, of pots. I'm making some Telecaster stuff today, which is what made me think to make this video, because we have this. Okay, and I'm not cutting this because I don't want people to think that maybe I was like hand picking pots, right? So let's get our resistance here. So let's just check. I'm going to turn the pot all the way to 10. And we're going to check. Whoops, I went the wrong way. My bad. My bad. Oh, because I have it on millivolts, dork. All right, 265. I'll tell you what, let's do this. And I know that this is a lot of goofing around and we could edit this and etc. But the reason I'm doing it this way is because I want to talk about why this is or isn't important. But we need to get real numbers and they need to be legit, not hand-picked, okay? If that makes sense. So all right, so that one is I should make sure it's all the way. Okay, 230, what are we calling that? 234? All right. So 234. We're just going to keep going through these real quick. $224. Oh, that's interesting. So we went the other way. Oh, not really. 252. $232. So that's the four of those. Now let's look at the 500s. $541. These are actually, I think these are 550K pots actually. Oh, that was kind of all over the place. Hang on. Well, maybe these are. Hang on. Let me make sure. I'll put it on the screen what they are. I can't remember if I ordered 500s or 550s this time. Sometimes it has to do with availability. These must be 500s. Okay, 436. $537. $425. Wow. Okay, and I know the focus was all over the place, and that was sort of annoying, but it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to get a baseline for this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and do the math on this, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I did the math, and we've got 7%, 11%, 1%, and 6% on the 250s. And we've got 3%, 13%, 7%, and 15% on the 500s. So when you see 224K and you see 537K, 436K, it's actually not as far off. A couple of these are a little more than I'd like them to be, actually. Our stuff is usually within about 10%, but with everything, it's manufacturing. So, but I like them to be at 10%. That's where we do it. That's where we intentionally buy with the quality of 10%. Having a 15% out is a little outside of what I like. In fact, I will probably mention that to WD. It's cool though to just randomly take some of these. So if we are 10%, okay, now most of these are not. Most of these are way less than 10%. But if we're 10% out, above or below on our potentiometer values in the guitar, what does that do, if anything, to your guitar tone? we're going to sort of whiteboard this. Okay, so now you've heard me talk about this before, that in every pickup you have what we would call a resonant peak, which is basically, so it kind of looks, the pickup sort of makes a frequency and then it's got a sort of a jump in the middle like this, right? And our low frequencies would be this way and our high frequencies would be this way. And this could be anywhere in here when it comes to your pickup. So, you know, a humbucker is going to be a little bit more to the left. A single coil is going to be a little bit more to the right. And then of course within that, you've got your frequency response as far as like your high frequencies, your low frequencies, etc. Like your clarity versus your bass, your mid-range and all that. So each pickup will do part of this, and this could be wider or narrower, it could be taller or shorter, and it could be positioned this way or this way, right? So that resonant peak of that pickup. Now, when we change pots in the guitar and we go from 250s to 500s, the default answer would be that we would actually just lose highs, right? Like that's what you'll hear people say that, like, and you'll even hear me say it in videos, like if you go from 500K to 250K, that you would actually lose highs. But it doesn't just do that. It actually also shifts this resonant peak from left to right. It actually moves it, and depending on the pickup, it'll actually change the width of this right here. So it'll actually change the entire sound of the guitar, not just losing, quote unquote, losing highs. Now the question is, when you go from 250s, okay, to 500s, how much difference does that make to you? So we've got a video, I'll put a little gray box up here, and I want you to go watch that video after you watch this one. And then I want you to come back in the comments of this video and tell me how much difference did it make to you. Now that's doubling the resistance of your pots from going 250 to 500, okay, in that guitar. Now when we scale that down now to 3%, 7%, and really we'd like it to be on the outside 10%. This one's 15, I don't like that. So we'd like it to be on the outside about 10%. 13's pushing it a little bit. So there we go. So how much is it going to shift this and this whole thing at 3% as opposed to 100%? Now the other thing that we need to think about is that the pots are doing two completely different jobs, okay? So we've got our volume pot and we've got our tone pot. So we've got these three legs here and we've got these three legs here. All right, so we take our capacitor, let's say it's a 15, and then we ground it there. And this is actually called, our tone capacitor is actually called a variable resistor. That's how that works, okay? This, when we ground this part of our volume pot, right? And then we have our input here, and we have our output going to our output jack here. This is actually called a voltage divider. Without getting too much into the weeds here, the bottom line is these things are doing two different jobs. So in a Telecaster, if we have, let's say we have a 234K volume pot and we have a 252K tone pot, it's honestly not going to make that big of a difference because these are serving two completely different functions in the guitar. It doesn't really matter. So when you hear folks talking about matching resistances of tone caps or tone pots and stuff, or, you know, of pots in their guitar, you're going to be around 10% anyway. Think of that on the grand scale of things with this here, and then minimize that down, and then think about the fact that these two are doing two different jobs. Now, what if, and we'll leave that sitting there if you still need to visualize that, what if we're now talking about a Les Paul where we have a volume, tone, tone, okay? The thing we need to think about here is we've got our neck pickup and we've got our bridge pickup. These two pickups are doing two completely different jobs. So what that means is, So let's go back to our, let's go back to this diagram here. So, you know, if we've got our low frequencies this way, and we've got our high frequencies this way, right? Then the resonant peak of this pickup here is going to be kind of over this direction, and the bridge pickup is they're going to overlap some, but it's going to kind of be over this direction. So if we change this by 3%, or this by 5%, or this, which is doing a completely different job, by 8%, it's not really going to make that much difference, because not only is this doing a different job because it's controlling two different pickups with two different resonant peaks anyways, this pickup is a different resonant peak. This tone knob is doing a different job. So none of these four things are doing the same job. So to match them, or go out of your way or spend a lot of money to match them, is kind of pointless. Now, does that mean that none of this matters at all whatsoever? No. Here is my suggestion. When you have a Les Paul style guitar like this, my suggestion would be, let's say you have a bag of pots, okay? So we've got, don't worry about the percentages. Let's say we've got a bag of pots. So we've got 541, 436, 537, and 425. Let's say you order these from my website and you get these. It would, in my opinion, and I do this, I measure this, I'm going to put the 541 on a volume, and I'm going to put the 537 on the other volume. And then I'm going to put the 436 on one of the tones, and I'm going to put the 425 on the other tone. You can decide how you want to do this. It doesn't really matter. I don't know that who cares, you know, whether the 541 goes here or here. They're so close, so it doesn't really matter. But in my opinion, because we're talking about a voltage divider on the volume, we're actually letting more clarity through to the pickup. So yes, it's in a margin of error, but hey, since we're making the choice, I'm going to put the higher ones over here, and I'm going to put the lower ones over here. Let's say in another situation, we have a Telecaster, and you just have a volume and a tone, and now you've ordered two 250s from me, and you've got a 252 and a 224. Same thing, in my opinion, I'm going to put the 252 in the volume, and I'm going to put the 224 in the tone, and that's probably going to be the way I do it. If I've got a Stratocaster, and we've got a volume and a neck middle tone here, and we've got a bridge tone here. Let's say we ordered the 234, the 224, and the 252. That's what came. Then in my opinion, I'm going to put the 252 in the volume, and then I'm going to put the other lower ones in the tones. Because the variable resistor has a whole lot less effect on the overall tone of the guitar than the voltage divider that is the volume pot. That's really the long and the short of that. So, all that to say, spending $5 for a pot is totally fine. Going through your drawer. If you've got some stuff in your drawer. Now, the quality of the pots themselves, you know, if we're looking at some of this cheap Chinese stuff that comes on a, you know, real inexpensive guitar, the carbon tracks and those things can have a lot to do with your tone. But if we're talking about, let's say you just get, you know, 4 or 5 pots from me at Dylan Talks Tone, and I was hoping the dog wasn't going to hit the tripod. You know, and you see those little variants in values. Long and the short of it is, I would put the higher of the group in the volume section, and I would put the lower of the group in the tone section. Other than that, I wouldn't really worry about it. I do think it's helpful to watch that video, the 250 versus 500K video that we did not long ago, and just listen to it so that you can understand when you change it by 100%, how much it matters to you. Because the rest of your rig and the rest of your pickups and how you play and all that kind of stuff, you can't just make a blanket statement and say, this is better than that, because all of our rigs are different and we play differently. So we'll watch that video and be like, how much difference does it make to me? And then scale that down and just be like, you know what? Higher values in volume and lower values in tone when we're talking about sorting through a bag of pots. I don't think it's worth spending $25. You know, they got those Dunlop super pots and stuff. That's basically because they're like dust proof and they're supposed to last a lot longer. But the CTS and Bourne stuff that we carry, it's in everything, right? It's in all the custom shop stuff. It's in all of the really good, you know, higher quality instruments. I think it's fine. And if you can just filter through this and use this way and kind of visualize that, I think it will make the entire thing a lot more simple, and you'll spend a lot less money on stuff that doesn't really matter. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have questions about this, put it in the comments below.